Oh, kia ora tātou. Ka tūpina aku nei mihi atu. Kia koutou, nā kai mā taki kia tātou I tēnei ki o nāu. No reira, I rire e tērā, tāku nei mihi atu kia koutou, e Maria, e mā taki mai nei I rine tēnei kaupapa whakahirihira, no reira I rine I tērā, te mihi kawana kia koutou. Heoi, ko te timatana o te tātou kaupapa I tēnei ki o nāua. Me karakia, kia pai ai te haeringa o nā whakawhiti kōrero I wairinu e tātou, kia tae te Maria ko koutou rā, I ata manaki, I ata whakaaro kia mātou nei kaupapa, no reire rini tērā, tāku e whakaarihi tātou ki te karakia, a kainui tātou. Atapare, atapatū e rani, ia mai ko te tāpana ko kahukuri te rā, e rono hiria, I awhi mai te whai au te amaro, uwhi, wero, tū mai te mauri. O mie, uie, tāki. O kātia ke tātou, o koutou nā Maria, tēnei tū ana, e tētoko ana, e mihi kauna kia tātou. Tuatahi ake, ka mihi tuatahi ki te rina rawa, nānai hanaia tēnei rani, e whakahuhia tātou, koe te timatana me te whakamutuna hoki. O kira tāku ni mihi atu kia koutou atu I tēnei wā, I tēnei rohe, o te ao nei, kia koutou e mihi atu mai Aotearoa. No reire rui tērā, tāku ni mihi atu ki te kini Māori, kini tūheitia, no hanara te taumata o tā rātou mata tipuna pai Māori, ki aia me tāna whāna. O kira tāku ni mihi atu, ki oro tātou ko whetūrani te. Ko era tātou ko hine ki te pō haere atu rā. No reira, ki nā mātā waka, hurino o te motu, hurino o te ao. Tāku ni mihi atu kia koutou, atu I tēnei taha o te ao, Aotearoa whānuine. No reire rui tērā, tāku ni mihi atu, kia tātou te kanu I ora, e ora tonu nei. Tēnā koutou, a kera matatu katoa. He mihi kawana, he mihi whakahirehire tēnei kia koutou, ko whāki nei o koutou manawa, nākau hoki ki tēnei kaupapa nunui. No reire rune tērā, he mihi poto, he mihi aroha tēnei, atu I Aotearoa nei kia koutou, no reira tēnā koutou, a kia ora mai tātou katoa, a kahuri. No reira, ai, koe te wā o te tātou waiata, no reira, kei te mihi atu. Tare uke. Kia ora. E mihi aroha ki o koutou te Maria. He waiata tautoko tēnei ki taku nei kōrero. Nō reira, mamihira kia whi, kia kōrua, e tautoko ana taku nei kōrero. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tata katoa. Kia ora everybody. Kia ora means hello to everybody out there. That's our native language of te reo Māori. So I might just take a seat now and just to welcome everybody and just to say that it's really a privilege to kick off this this kaupapa. Kaupapa means this initiative and this awesome concept that I'm privileged and we're privileged to be a part of. So from Aotearoa, New Zealand, the land of the long white cloud and the land of the tangata whenua Māori, he mihi aroha, greetings to everybody that's come on to this kaupapa for this next storython for the next 24 hours. Nō reira, big welcome from us here in Aotearoa. And just to briefly to acknowledge my native tongue, te reo Māori, and what we do here in Aotearoa by way of greeting and acknowledgement is speaking in our native tongue and acknowledging all the elements and all the things that have allowed this to be possible. So we might think in a spiritual sense, acknowledging deities in the Lord and spiritual significance of us being here, the whenua, the land in which we are part of, and those that have been with us and those that have passed on in terms of te ao Māori, the stalwarts and the rangatira, the leaders of our people that keep us thriving today and have been doing so for years and years. So acknowledging our ancestors that have allowed us to be here today. Yeah, and so that's a brief little snapshot of what I did to start off our time here, and then our awesome singing duo here that supported my my talk by way of a waiata, which is what we do here in Aotearoa with our Māori people, and singing by way of acknowledging the kōrero that's just gone on. Yeah. So big ups to my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, and we'll introduce ourselves as we go forward. So for the next part, we're going to introduce our team here from Aotearoa that are kicking this thing off. So ko waio, so who am I? I'm Eugene Davis tōku ingoa. So my name is Eugene Davis. My affiliation and my roots are where I actually currently live now, within Hamilton. It's in the Waikato, within the North Island of New Zealand. And my roots stem here in terms of my ancestors coming from a local tribe called Ngāti Haua. And so I'm very privileged to be staying here. And that's my connection to Waikato. So Eugene Davis, Ngāti Haua, and I'm privileged to be part of this group because alongside the others that are going to be speaking and introducing themselves, part of a counselling collective here, a collective counsellors here within Waikato. So just a brief introduction for myself, and I'll just pass it on to my awesome backup singers to introduce themselves. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou katoa. My Māori is not very good, but I try. My Harriet toku ingo, Harriet Abel, and toku papa is Tori Reed, toku mama Harriet Aubrey, and I hail from Hastings. I grew up in Bridgepa, Hastings, and Waimarama was our beach, and Naruroro was our river. We spent many moments down there with our parents, and what else is there? Yeah. Kia ora. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Awa uina la o kou noko moku puni mai au o Oahu mai ka moku o ko alo poku mai ke ona ka ona o Kaneohe. Aloha everyone, my name is Lamar Khalil Benavides, originally from Oahu on the side, windward side, Kaneohe. It's where I'm born and raised. Now living here in Aotearoa, a land of the long white cloud, as Eugenie said, here in Hamilton, and it's lovely. And I appreciate being part of this. So aloha and kia ora, everyone. Mahalo.
Kia ora koutou. When we introduce ourselves in Māori, we give various markers for the people we're talking to be able to connect with us and know where we come from. And the first marker we give is our mountain. So ko Wetakia te maunga. Wetakia is my mountain. Ko Raukawa te moana. Raukawa is my body of water. Ko Ngāti Toa, ko Ngāti Koata, ngā iwi, ko Tainui Ahau. So those are my tribal affiliations. Ko Rawiri Heme, tōku papa, that's my daddy. Ko Winifred Morgan, tōku mama, that is my mother. And ko Vikili Wihongi, tōku ingoa. So tēnā koutou.
Kia ora whānau. I think it's my turn to introduce myself. Ko Mahuba te maunga, ko le tawa te awa, ko Janine te rohi, ko Awherika te whenua, mai i te tau 1747, ko Kleinans toko whānau, ko Elmarie toko ingoa na Awherika, ko Mabula toko ingoa na Awherika, ko Elmarie toko ingoa. Thank you very much. It's my privilege to be here with this group. My mountain and river are not from here, but I've been welcomed onto this land by Ngāti Ngaitahu. And I really appreciate that right now, it is on the land of Waikato Tainui that I teach and connect to you all. So kia ora and thank you to be here. That's a great privilege. I think it's John now.
Okay. Ko Waikato te awa. Waikato is the river that connects the two places that I have lived in New Zealand, in Hamilton and in Auckland. Ko Mangakiakia te maunga. One Tree Hill is part of who I am. It's where I was born. It's where my parents' ashes are spread and where their wedding photos were taken. And it's where I explored as a child and as a teenager, and where I learned to drive. It's also where my daughter died and where my grandfather died. And it's where I played cricket and rugby as a young person. Ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi. I am Pākehā, but through my makopuna, my grandchildren, I have two of them, I have connections with Ngāti Awa. And through two other grandchildren, I have links to Scotland. Ko Winslade te hapu. Winslade is my sub-tribe. Ko Matua, ko Maida taku mama, ko Norman taku papa. Maida and Norman are my parents. And ko John taku ingoa. My name comes last. This is the Maori way. It is also the social constructionist way, placing the person in context. And first comes the environment, then comes the social, and finally the individual. And I appreciate that way of being and that way of looking at people, including myself. So that's my introduction to who I am. Kathy.
Kia ora, John. I'm Kathy. My ancestors came to this land of the long white cloud in the early days of colonisation. All of them went to the deep south, and that's where the rivers and the mountains of the south are the ones that I associate with, although I've lived all my adult life up here in the north, and my children see themselves and my grandchildren as very much located here in the Waikato. My ancestors who came here came to leave behind the difficulties of Scotland, life in Scotland and England, hoping for something better in this new land. And it's hard work is the legacy that they have passed on down through the generations of our family. Unported is the beautiful harbour of Otago that I think of. One end of it, Mount Cargill, the other end, Saddle Hill. I am connected to John and Elmarie and Eugene and Vicky through the Masters of Counselling program at the University of Waikato. So that's one of the important whānau in my life, and that's where I connect to Steve too as well, because Steve and I taught there together some years ago when you were in New Zealand, Steve. So I'll pass to you. Where's Steve gone?
Kia ora, Kathy. It's a humbling privilege to be invited to speak for a few minutes while in this ritual. And I'm from San Francisco. The Pacific Ocean is my water. The Mount Tamalpais is my mountain. And I'm in Massachusetts at this point, but I had the unbelievable gift of being a guest for Eugene and Kathy and Elmarie many years ago, one of the most special years of my life. So it's very touching to me to be reconnected with this whānau in this way, and to have a chance to meet Vicky Lee and reconnect with John, who we have had a history together as well. I also just want to quickly welcome all of you listening in. Just say I'm so excited by the possibilities that this Linking Lives Storython might generate. The idea was sparked off because I realized I just am so blessed to have these nourishing, meaningful relationships in my home community and the Narrative Therapy Initiative. And I just, felt selfishly like I wanted the world to know these people. And so that kind of sparked it off. Then I realized everyone has special people they want the world to know about. And so that's what kind of kicked this off. The next 24 hours is not about impressing people or performing. It's about meeting people, making new contacts, and building bridges across communities. We'll have the privilege of hearing small expressions of what people are finding meaningful these days. And if we orient ourselves properly, we'll invariably hear something that touches us, moves us, resonates with us. So I invite you to listen with an open heart and a willingness to be taken someplace new. For me, this wave is about the possibilities for intimacy, something I treasure. The Storython's already been a huge success for me as I've met new people I'm excited to get to know and reconnect with people I admire and miss, like these people here speaking now. Kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora. Kia ora, Steve. And thanks everybody for contributing to this part of the this process of what we call in Te Ao Māori whanaungatanga. So whakawhānau is to make connections, and as we do this process of connecting, as we sit and listen, we can connect with the various narratives or the various stories or parts of each person's introduction, which makes it a bit more, well, the hope is a bit more special and significant as we share each other's connections before we go into what we're going to do together later. And so, really representing and acknowledging who we are, and subliminally, there's some connections going on already. So sitting here listening to everybody's introductions, there's connections we're making. And that's a very significant part of whanaungatanga or whakawhānau, which is very intrinsic to what we do here in Aotearoa with each other. So very much appreciate everybody's contributions to that. Thank you, Steve. It's been a while, Steve, but really good to see you, and really special time. So yeah, thanks again. And e wātiana te papa. And that's the sort of phrase I might use, and Kathy and Elmarie, Vicky will hear me say that a lot. And that's about opening up the space now for what's possible from here on. And so as we finish this part of the process, E wātana te papa, ka tono te rākau, and the rākau that I have in terms of facilitating this part of the process now gets handed on to someone to grab it and go to the next part of what we're doing. So, e wātana te papa.
Kia ora, Eugene, and thank you so much for the tautoko of us all in this process. So, Vicky Lee, you told us the other day that you had been thinking about a story, and since you said that, I've been thinking about what story you might be bringing to us today. So, with a real sense of anticipation, Roko, that Eugene was passed to me, to you, and
Thank you, Kathy.
what is it that you've been thinking about?
Well, it's a very small story, but it has meaning for me. Right before we went to level 4, which required everybody to lock down in their homes and to stay with the people in your homes specifically. So right before that, I went to see my mother, and she has a grandson living with her. So she was okay that we would stay separate. And it would be the first time that I wouldn't be physically in her space every single day. But she was all right with that. And a couple of weeks before, we'd already come upon a different way of greeting. I would curtsy to her instead of hugging and kissing her, and Mum would give me this big flourished bow when we'd say goodbye, and I insisted that she make everyone in the house, everyone that would come visit her, either curtsy or bow. No more kissing and hugging, which is our preference, of course, for a while. So we'd been doing that for a little while, and then decided that level 4, I would come see her every day, but it would be through the window. So she would open her window or open her sliding door, and we'd talk through the screen. And that went on for weeks and weeks. And she seemed to be managing fine. And then several weeks later, the night before we went to the next level, which would mean that we could include a few more people in what we call in New Zealand our bubbles, I went to see my mum, and it was cold outside. And so she said, come on in. I was like, wow, I get to go in the house again. So we sat on couches quite distant from each other, and we were talking, and it was lovely to be in the same space as her. And then after a while, I got up to leave, and I completely forgot about our curtsy farewell, and I went to hug her, and I went very close to her and to put my arms around her and kiss her, as I normally would do. And I remembered at the last moment, and I pulled back, and I said, oh, sorry, Mum. And she reached her arms around me and pulled me to her. And she was crying, and she said, no, hug me, kiss me. I don't care if you kill me. And I said, Mother, I'm not going to kill you. I don't have the coronavirus. But we were, it was a beautiful moment when we finally could hug and touch and kiss again as mother and daughter. It was, even though I'd seen her every day, it was amazing. That's lovely, but it's not enough. So that's my wee story.
Okay. So if John and Kathy, if you have got any questions to put to Vicky, is that okay, Vicky?
So Vicky, this is, I'm not quite responding exactly to what you've already told us, but I wonder what's, what the next step in the story of how your mum and you come together physically is, whether you have, are at all, Like, do you continue the hugging and kissing, or have you gone back to the bowing and curtsying?
No, no. We've kept up the hugging and kissing. We're doing quite well in New Zealand, for those of you watching from other countries, and we've gone from a level 4 lockdown, which most of the country took very seriously, and we're now at level 2, likely to even decrease in the restrictions. So no, we've kept up with the hugging and the kissing, and as our forms of greeting. And yeah, it's we thought we were okay with the curtsies, but clearly not.
So what did it mean to you that evening when your mum said to you, Vicky, don't stay outside in the cold, come in, come in? What happened for you?
Yes. Well, my mum is a very good rule follower. Perhaps she should have been a policewoman or a lawyer. But so I was surprised, because I'd always brought a blanket with me when I'd come to visit. So if it was chilly, I could wrap up and still respect her space. So that was when she asked me to come in, I was surprised. But it was really, it was beautiful. It was the coming together of our mother-daughter relationship in ways that were more familiar. And yeah, as I think about it, with the removal of that, the space, the window, the door, the screen, that's probably what instigated my complete disregard of a curtsy, you know, as a greeting. The physical space was gone, and so you step immediately into old patterns and old relationships. But I was excited. She said, come in, and I remember thinking, wow, that's so cool. I get to sit with her again.
Vicky, I'm wondering whether when you were with your mother, whether it was like a moment of transgression where you were breaking the rules and creating a kind of an understanding between you, or building on an understanding between you of how a mother-daughter relationship might be. Was it like that?
It was. So you're right, a moment of transgression. I felt quite guilty and kind of stern with myself for forgetting forgetting to greet her the way we had become used to. So I felt, oh, how could I do that? You know, I shouldn't have forgotten. But you know, it was the day before. We would have been allowed to greet that way anyway. And so, yeah, it was just going back to normal patterns, you know, familiar patterns that are embedded in us through generations, really. It's not just me, the pattern of my mother and I, it's her and her mother, and me and my children. And the familiarity felt beautiful. Yeah.
But in some way it was also acknowledging that the coronavirus has changed things a little bit.
Yes, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm so blessed that in New Zealand, our trial with the coronavirus and in dealing with lockdown and having to work from home and still look after family, with all of those restrictions imposed, I'm very grateful that it wasn't a horrific experience. There was challenges, most definitely, but I know a lot of people struggled, and as a counsellor who worked throughout the lockdown and met with my young people that I work with through Zoom and on the phone, I heard firsthand of the trauma that they continued to experience. And I wasn't experiencing difficulty to those degrees. But I think once I met with my mum and we crossed that barrier, and all the tears flooded and the emotion came to the surface, I guess that was my trauma, really, not being able to hug my mum. Who's in her 80s and won't be here long. And so I'm so glad that she, through her very strict observance of coronavirus protocol, will be here for a while longer.
And Vicky, as you spoke just then in response to John, well, you were speaking of your care for your mum. And earlier, as you spoke of her first giving you that first hug, it was like you were speaking of her care for you. And, you know, I sort of was touched by hearing those from in my own life, noticing that transfer from which generation is doing the care for which at what times, and the ways in which this might, you know, the virus might have changed that. But in that first moment, it was your mum caring for you in that familiar way, as well as you caring for her. Am I understanding what you're...
Yes, that's exactly right, Kathy. Yes, I mean, it was her that pulled me into her embrace, and her that said, you know, I don't care if I die. I want you to hug me, you know. But she would have known too that as much as she needed that physical touch, I was so missing that from her as well. And so, yes, it's those generations of caring coming together, which is really, really important worldwide, but also here in New Zealand, isn't it? You know, in our Māori culture, our kaumātua and our kuia, our koros, our older people are never lose their importance in our life. In fact, as they age, their importance increases. It doesn't devalue in any way, shape, or form. And when we lose our older people, it's such a it's such a huge loss. It's such a huge loss. So I have been very mindful of people around the world who have lost their parents and their grandparents and not been able to be with them. I have not experienced that, but I think I can feel a little bit of what that must be like, because of how much we mourn and we ache when we lose our elderly in our culture. But yeah, it was this co-caring again.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Kathy and John.
Sure. Do we pass on now? Somebody else?
To Eugene. Or have you got another question, John?
I do have another question.
Yeah, sure.
Vicky, I was thinking about the ways in which you and your mother worked out what you were going to do. And it struck me that this was very much about, not about following the government's rules, but about following your own patterns. And I wonder whether you would comment on that.
Yes, well, we disrupted the pattern initially by coming up with a lighter, a fun way to greet that would keep our mother safe. And that was the curtsy and the bow. And And, you know, I taught all my grandchildren when they go see my mother, their great nana, that they must just bow and curtsy, and so they'd practice, and it would be so cute. Mum would watch them through the window doing these very elaborate curtsies and and falling over in the process. But so that's, you know, we have to do that, don't we? We try and do these things to lighten the severity of what must be at the moment. But as soon as it, you know, the situation allows for it, we draw on these generational patterns that have so much meaning for us, and that's where we went in an instant.
Yes, I'm thinking of my grandchildren I have a granddaughter who's 8 years old, and she was most particular about the rules. And the rules for an 8-year-old are very important, of course. And so she was trying to maintain this 2-meter distance and keep me at a distance, but it didn't last very long. She came and gave me a hug very quickly, and it was lovely.
Yes, yes, that's quite painful, isn't it? It creates actually physical pain when you cannot touch your parents or your children or your grandchildren. I would find I would be physically aching. Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So, where do we go from here?
To you, have you got? Kia ora, Vicky.
Kia ora, Anne-Marie. So, Eugene, yeah, we're passing the rako to you, my friend.
Yeah, well, kia ora, and we're sort of just having a small conversation here about opening up, you know, the space for you know, for sharing our own sort of experiences within the lockdown period. So I mean, if time allows, and no pressure. But and if I just take on what Vicky's been saying, that e tika ana e te tuahine. So she's right. We wonder about, however, always mindful of the role that our kuia and kaumātua krauas play in. And this rurihi koro heke ikonei, this matriarch of the whare, has been everything but anything but, you know. So she's there being our po within our whare. So Vicky talks about our bubble, and I think we've got 10 or 11 in the whare.
It's a big bubble.
Yeah, it's a big bubble. And and so it's been quite special to notice the differences in how we previously might have been ships in the night through various things, but I guess it's been more time to notice who we are and how we operate, because we've been in the bubble. But yeah, so just to acknowledge that, Mum, in terms of her role here within the whare. Something a moment I'd like to share is noticing, really, and that's around the struggles that around how the rules have sort of put things in place. When I say rules, the safety measures and the restrictions that are being put on certain rohe and regions within New Zealand, and how I've been privileged and honoured and inspired by our people the Māori people to do what they need to do to keep their people safe. And I'm talking about the different hapu, the different tribes, we might call them, of our Māori people, and what measures they've taken to themselves to safeguard their spaces and their rohe, their areas in which their communities reside. And it's been challenging, and I know there's been a lot of challenges, but just the mere fact that they all come together to do what they feel is right for their people and their areas. And so there's been some really good collaborations going on between local authorities and the iwi authorities, if you want to call it that. And then there's been challenges as well. And with those restrictions come limitations on the ability for us to enact our usual rituals around things. And Vicky talked about many families have not been able to connect with their loved ones if their loved ones have passed away in the last 6 or so weeks. And it's not like the considerations have always been there. I don't think it sort of really hurts me to feel that the mana hasn't been sort of acknowledged so much within our people to be able to still practice their rituals and customary rites, and still be safe about that, given the roles of and the impacts of COVID-19. And yeah, that's what I've been noticing. I'm being very heartened by the measures that they've taken on, but also acknowledging the challenges that they've had to face. When understandings aren't always connecting. Yeah. So,
Kia ora, Yuj. I've kind of got 2 directions of questions, and you started, talking. So I'll ask you this one. If you don't like that, you can ask me to try the other one. Is that okay?
I mean, yeah.
You started personally in talking about your whare and saying, you've stopped being ships who pass in the night, and you're noticing yourselves, and noticing each other in your home, and I guess I just sort of with the thought of Vicky Lee's story and the conversations through the glass and her wrapped in her rug, wondering, what some of the noticings in your home that have been precious, is there one particular noticing maybe that's precious, or that just sort of had you pause and think, or kind of see something in a different way? I don't know. Does that one interest you? Would you want to try the other one?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kathy. I guess one of them would be, a very standout one would be my daughter and her doing her, I think, both study and training. So in our family, we can be quite intentional about doing things like in terms of studying for, whether it be for school or tertiary study, but also at church. Sorry, I heard a church at the background. Seminary church. Yeah. In terms of that's the karanga from our rurigi, and training in terms of physical training. And our boy, who's currently serving a mission in Birmingham, England, he was a very strong role model for my daughter. And not that she wanted to follow him, but he was very avid participant in his own physical training, and he's since gone. He was quite a good role model in there. And she's pretty much picked up the raka without any sort of direction from her parents. And she's out there in the morning doing her training, and right now she's doing her studying. And that's something that I've very noticed, because I know it wasn't as much as I'd like to. There was an element to not sort of push too much, but over these last 6-7 weeks, yeah, that's been very noticeable about her doing stuff without a push or nudge from her parents. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. But so like I might think, oh, self-discipline, but what would you call that? That she's following her brother and doing the physical thing, but doing her study and doing her training without you having to, what's
Yeah, she's definitely got her own mind.
Yeah.
Hooray!
Kia kaha.
She likes to. She's almost like, she's been the boss since she was about 7-8 years old. So very determined to do what she wants. I think there's an element of listening, but to do it when she wants and in her time. And yeah, I guess this is her currently her tino rangatiratanga, her ability to self-govern and self-determine what she wants to do, which is sort of it's sort of going into other elements of her thinking and her projection at the moment for what she wants to do when she leaves school. So it's a very, very visionary girl, but that's what I'd probably call it. Yeah.
Do you know rangatiratanga? So as your dad, how is it for you to be kind of noticing this in this different way at this time?
Yeah, it's really special. It's I'm always conscious of not pushing too much, because there's pressure, and the young people have got plenty of pressure these days, and don't sort of want to add to it. So it's quite humbling, really. Yeah, it's very humbling to see her do that, and I'm just want to bring in the ruruhi here. She wants to say something about her moko. So,
okay.
Granddaughter.
Over this period of lockdown, well, as you know, everyone over the age of 70 had to stay at home and or stay in their own areas. And so her mokopuna, her name is Moana. She's named after her auntie, her mother's sister. And she comes and says to me, "Come on, Nan, I'll take you for a walk." And we'll go for a walk, Nan. And she's, what is she, 15? Yep. She's 15 years old, And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing for a young person to do, for an elderly. I mean, I'm a Nan, and we say things to each other, and we just seem to have a good rapport with each other. So we get up, she says, "Nan, we'll go at 8 o'clock, she says to me. And I say to her, "Oh, okay then, okay." And so she goes out and does her exercises, and then she's back. It's 8 o'clock, Nan. So she's very much like her dad, a very time person. It's very, she keeps things on time. And anyway, so we go for our walk, and we've been doing that pretty much since lockdown has started. And so it's encouraged me to keep on walking, because I was beginning to feel like, oh, the couch is my place now. But I was very appreciative of her and her feelings, how she feels, and how she has inherited many things that we've all been raised with, all these kind of things, and very blessed. I feel very, very blessed, and it's also been a blessing for me, because we have a big house, and we've dwindled down from about 12 to 8 now, and 4 of the boys have left, and they're doing their things, and anyway. And so it's been a privilege for me to watch the parents with their children and cooking dinner, they have work, you know, they do their work in, at home here, and they also help each other. He cooks, and he cooks, and you know, the wives are doing their work, and as I say, not many have this privilege of looking on. We don't have to look through a glass window or anything like that, you know. And so it's been a great blessing in my life to have all my, not all of them, I have 2 sons in Australia, but they keep in touch with the video, you know, and it's so lovely. And it has been my privilege to be here at this time with my mokopunas and my son-in-laws. They're wonderful men. I have great son-in-laws. They're beautiful men, and I'm very, very blessed. And I like to share that with you. And it's in humility that I share this with you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora. And I took on this terrible role of watching time, because when we were asked who would do that, and I said, oh, well, nobody wanted, and I said, well, I will. It's that art of interruption. And it's, I always think about Sally Ann Roth in Boston when I know that I'd have to do a strategic interruption. So Steve was asking us to kind of finish in enough time to give him a chance to bring the next group in. So I'm sorry that we don't have time to, unless John, you want to just briefly respond to the story we've just heard.
That time was going by too. So
yeah.
My responses would take too long, I suspect.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to go with you interrupting for the sake of time.
But just to acknowledge your appreciation of Yuja's daughter, your granddaughter, and your whānau, so thank you for that. But Yuja, you were going to bring things back and to complete the kōrero, the talk for our group, and to pass it back to Elmarie, who will be carrying on, and Steve, who'll be carrying on surfing this wave as we all just glide off and watch the rest of us here. So over to you, Yuj, the rāko's yours.
Kia ora. Yeah, ka tia ki tātou, te rata mi mai waka koutou na kai pātai. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a privilege to be here in this time. And once again, Steve, thanks for this. And really, and we'll be watching on the link or somehow come off here. The next group on with Elmarie. So, yeah, just to whakakapi or close this, me rata mihi mai kia koutou, kia tātou. No reira, anei mātou, e whakakapi ki te himene, e whakakapi te tātou nei kōrero tēnei wā no reira, kia ora tātou.
Makaria mai, nori te kau, kia o mai, raro tori te po, ke kōrero.
Kai nui tātou kia tātou katoa, te atapai o tō tātou ariki ko Ukraiti. Me tā roha tātou, me te whiwhina tahitana ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmine.
Ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora,
everybody.
kia ora. Kia ora, New Zealand. Thank you for such a lovely wave to get us started. And we're about to move from Aotearoa to Japan. And so we'll see you soon. Miss you.
See you, Steve.
Kia ora, everybody.